When Scout and Jen were children, they confined their activities to the southern neighborhood. They have stopped tormenting Boo Radley. Jem and Scout didn't like to pass in front of Mrs. Henry Lafayette Dubois' house, but they didn't have option unless they wanted to walk a mile. Mrs. Dubois lived alone. She was very old and spent most of her time in her bed in wheelchair. It was rumored that she kept a gun in her scarf and gloves. Jen and Scout hate her because she always criticized them. Articles, Scout's and Jen's father had told them that she was very old and ill, and he had advised them just to hold their head up and be a gentleman. The day before Jan's 12th birthday, his money was burning his pocket, and he thought he had enough money to buy a miniature steam engine for himself and a baton with sequin and tinsel for Scout. The next day, when they were in front of Mrs. Dubois' house, she said that Jem had brought down Mrs. Maudine Scuppernon in the morning, but Jem hadn't been near to Mrs. Maudine Scuppernon since last summer. Also, she criticized Scout because she wore an overall, and she said she should be in a dress and a camisole like a lady. And Mrs. Dubois said that Scout will work at OK Cafe. And she said, not only a finch waiting on table, but one in the courthouse allowing for niggers. And she thought that their father, Atticus, was not better than the nigger she worked for. Then she mentioned that the health of finches were in the asylum. Scout and Jen bought her toys, but Jen was not happy. And when they were in front of Mrs. Dubois' front yard, he entered, and he forgot everything that Atticus had told him, and that Mrs. Dubois had a gun. But he didn't begin to count down until he had cupped the cup of every camellia that Mrs. Dubois owned, until her ground was littered with green vines and leaves. Jen bent Scout baton against his knee, and shaped it in two and threw it down. Scout was screaming, and Jen pulled her hair. When they went at home, Calpurnia seemed to know something, but she gave a biscuit with butter to Jen. When Atticus arrived at home, he had a Scout baton in one hand and Camellia's buns in the other hand. Atticus asked Jem if he was responsible for that, and Jem said yes. Atticus said, "Why did you do something like that?" And Jen said, "She called you love for nigger and trash." And Atticus said that it was not an excuse to do something like that. And he advised Jen talk with Mr. Dubois. Then Atticus sat in the rocking wheel, and Scout said, "You don't care what happened to him. You just sent him to get shot when all he was doing was standing up for you." Atticus said, "When the summers come, you have to keep your head against far worse thing. And when Jen arrived, he said that he had cleaned Mrs. Dubois' garden. And every Saturday he had to try to make the camellias grow again. And also, he said that Mrs. Dubois wanted him to read her every day after school 2 hours for a month. The following Monday, Jem and Scout went to Mrs. Dubois' house, and Jessie admired them. When an oppressive odor met them when they crossed the threshold. In the corner of the room was Mrs. Dubois' bed, and a marble-topped washstand. On it were a glass with a teaspoon on it, a red ring, a bob of absorbent cotton, and a steel alarm clock standing in three tiny legs. Mrs. Dubois was horrible. Her face was the color of their pilot. The corner of her mouth were glistening with wet. She had a spot on her cheeks, and her pale eye had black pinpoint pupils. Her hands were knobby, and the cuticles were grew over her fingernails. Jem opened G.B. Ivanhoe and began reading. When Jem came to a word that he didn't know, he skipped it out. But Mr. Dubois made him spell it. Suddenly, Scout noticed that something was wrong with Mrs. Dubois, because she moved her head from side to side, and he opened her mouth wildly, and her tongue undulated faintly. Then the alarm clock started to run, and Jessie said that it was medicine time and sent the guys to their house. When Atticus arrived, he gave 2 yellow pencils to Scout and a football magazine to Jem. Then the next day, at Mr. Dubois' house, they did the same. One day, Scout asked her father what was exactly a nigger lover, and Atticus explained that a nigger lover was a term that doesn't mean anything, and ignorant people use it when they think somebody's favoring Negroes over and about themselves. One afternoon, while Mr. Dubois was correcting Jem, Atticus arrived at Mr. Dubois' house because it was too late. It was 14 minutes past 5, and the guys realized that they had been staying a little bit longer at Mr. Dubois' house every day. When Atticus said to Mr. Dubois that the reading day were over, Mrs. Dubois asked him for 1 more week, just to be sure. Jem didn't tell anything at Mr. Dubois' house because his father Atticus stopped him. But when they were walking at home, Jem said that he had to do it for a month, and the month was up, and it wasn't fair. The following week, the guys realized that the alarm clock had ceased sounding, and Mrs. Dubois released them by saying, "That's all." One day, when Mrs. Dubois said, "That's all," she added, "That's all. Good day, you too." And the guys felt free. They ran, they jumped, and they screamed. Also, the spring gave them longer days to enjoy playing. One day, the telephone rang, and Atticus attended. And then he said that he will go to Mrs. Dubat's house. When Atticus returned to house, he was carrying a candy box. Then he sat down and put the box on the floor. And he explained Jen that Mrs. Dubat was dead, was was dead, and that she was not suffering anymore. Then he said that her feet were due to that she was a morphine addict. And finally, Atticus explained that Mr. Dubois called him to make her will, and her business were in order. But she said to him that she wanted to leave this world beholden to nothing and nobody, and she did it. Then Atticus explained that probably Mrs. Dubois couldn't hear any word while while Jen was reading for her because she was focused on the clock alarm. But she said to Jen that if he hadn't fallen into her hand, he had made him go to read for her anyway, because Atticus wanted that Jen see the other's perspective. Also, Atticus considered that Mr. Dubois was the bravest person that he had ever met. Then Jen asked that if she had died free, and Atticus said that she had died as free as the mountain air. Then Atticus gave the box to Jen, and when Jen opened the box, he found a perfect camellia surrounded by cotton. Its camellia was a snow on the mountain. When Jen saw the camellia, she opened his eye and screamed, "Oh, hell devil! Oh, hell devil!" And then he asked why she can't leave me alone. And Atticus said that maybe it was her way to say that everything was okay now. Then, when Jen went to bed, he threw the candy box, in the fire and picked up the chameleon. And when Scout went to bed, she saw Jen fingering its white petals.